Good morning, you guys. Your boy Ben Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. I hope you guys been having a good holiday. This is the week of Christmas, and also this week we're gonna have the start of the NBA season, guys. So strap yourselves and get ready because we got a lot of basketball to talk about. This week. I hope you guys are staying safe and staying healthy. During this pandemic, and we're gonna have a jam-packed show of basketball conversations. Most likely on Thursday because Friday is going to be Christmas time. So I'm going to push it for Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central Time. Okay, just wanted to give you guys a little note on that. So with that being said, this is another episode of Morning Historical Perspective, and this is actually a request by the OG to Raw for TV. He wanted me to talk about this particular series. So today we're going to talk about the 1969 NBA Finals between, once again, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Boston Celtics. Okay, so as you guys know, the Celtics and the Lakers were pretty much the premier rivalry of the NBA. And during that period of time, the Celtics in the 60s have basically won 8 titles in a row during that period of time. And if you look at it at their historical sense, okay, this was was their eighth time meeting each other in the NBA Finals, and all 7 of those times up until '69, the Celtics won. The Celtics have won the series either in a tough 7 game series, sweep, or 5 games, whatever the outcome it was. Okay, but there were a lot of distinctive things that were happening, during that particular series. Okay, during that time, the Celtics, as I said, won 8 titles in a row before their streak ended in '67 at the hands of, you know who, Wilt Chamberlain and the Philadelphia 76ers. Okay, by that time, the Lakers were pretty much off of another loss to the Celtics back in 1966. Okay, and they returned back to the finals back in 1968, where they once again lost in 6 games at the hands of the Boston Celtics. During that offseason in '68, the Lakers bolstered their roster by including one of the great specimens in NBA history, Mr. Wilt Chamberlain. Okay, so he was pretty much to the Lakers and joined the trio of both Elgin Baylor and Jerry West. Okay, now on the other side of the ledger, the Boston Celtics were entering their twilight years of the Celtic dynasty. Red Auerbach retired as coach and pretty much handed the reins to his franchise center, Bill Russell. Okay, becoming the only player coach in NBA history. All right, and during that time, the Celtics were pretty much going getting up there in age. Even though they won the title back in 1968, the Celtics were pretty much were running raggedy old at this particular time. If you understand what my drift is, when you look at the Celtics, during that time, the age level of this team, you look at the key players of that team. Okay, Russell at that time was pretty much 34 years of age. He was entering his final season in the NBA. John Havlicek was still in his prime, but he was 28 years old. Tom Sanders was 30. Sam Jones was 35. Don Nelson was 28. Okay, so during that period of time, already Tom Heinsohn retired. Uh, Bob Cousy retired. All right, Frank Ramsey retired. Okay, the main core players of the team pretty much retired, and then you doubled that with uh, Red Auerbach's retirement. This was a team that was still had its core pieces, but they were not the dominating teams that they were in the earlier part of the decade. All right, and they were severely underdogs to return back into the NBA Finals or even make the playoffs at all. On the other side, the Lakers obviously were able to acquire Wilt Chamberlain, but the problem with that was that there were a lot of high expectations for them, not just to dominate the regular season, but to throw the Celtics to win the NBA title. But the big issue was is that there was a bit of drama and bit of tension within the team, particularly on the fact that you know that Chamberlain's game conflicted with the slashing ability of Elgin Baylor and the scoring threat of Jerry West. But the big problem was that Butch Van Redekop, who was entering his second year as a coach of the Lakers, did not get along with Wilt Chamberlain. There have been stories about how both of them had very distinct, much had huge disdain with each other when they first met each other, and pretty much the problem was that Butch Van Bredikov always viewed Wilt Chamberlain as like a drama king, and Wilt Chamberlain viewed him as the worst coach that he's ever had to deal with, and he's had to deal with a lot of coaches throughout his career. And in fact, on a side note, I'm thinking about doing a video about the different coaches that Wilt Chamberlain has to deal with throughout his career because it's not something that it gets particularly talked about a lot. And so I'm thinking about doing that. You let me know what you think in the comment section below. But despite all of that, despite all the drama and the tension that was going on within the team, the Lakers still ran away with the best record in the NBA that year, winning 55 games, only second best to the Baltimore Bullets. Okay, and they were winning 7 more games than the rivals of the Celtics, who pretty much finished that regular season with 48 wins, and they were heavy underdogs. Okay, now although the Lakers, were able to skate through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs against the Warriors, against the Atlanta Hawks. For the Celtics, on the other hand, they had to survive a tough 5 game set against the Philadelphia 76ers and against an up and coming New York Knicks team that really, really tested them, both physically and mentally. They were able to escape out the Knicks in 6 games, who went on to win the title the next year. So heading into that '69 series, it was pretty much a David and Goliath type of series. All right, and the Celtics by that time were pretty much wrapped, were just with a walking wounded. They were exhausted by the amount of games they had to play, and it was so bad that even Sam Jones, who was pretty much their starting shooting guard through all those championship years, was playing so poorly that he pretty much lost his starting position to Larry Siegfried. Okay, and it was going to be in many people's eyes, the Lakers should have beaten this team in 5 quick games. You would think so, right? Wrong once again. And when the series started, it was pretty much a dogfight to the finish. All right, game one, pretty much prior to the series, uh, Bill Russell decided early on not to double team Jerry West, and he was banking on the fact that since Jerry West had to play a lot of minutes throughout the playoffs, that he was going to lose his shooting touch. Not the case. In one-on-one coverage in the first two games, um, Jerry West scored 53 points against both Sam Jones and Larry Siegfried, and it was a tight game throughout, and the Lakers won 120 to 118. Then in game two, Russell once again did not want to double team West. And once again, West continued to pour on the points, scoring 41 and leading them to a 2-0 lead in the series. And he was doing this with a very bad hamstring injury, guys. Let's keep that in mind as we're talking about this. Then the series shifts to Boston. All right. Then Russell pretty much said had no choice but to double team West. And with more double teams and more pressure in the backcourt, West pretty much lost his shooting touch. Okay, and so in that game three, after scoring pretty much 53 in game one, 41 in game two. Okay, in game three, when the series shifted, Jerry West only scored 24 points. Wilt pretty much scored 16, and Elgin only scored 11 on 4 of 18 shooting. While the Celtics pretty much had excellent contributions from John Havlicek and Larry Siegfried. Okay, Havlicek scored 34, and Larry Siegfried scored 28 points. All right. Then came one of the great games of that series, Game 4, a game that went down to the last second. Okay. So it was an ugly affair that was filled with 50 turnovers and low shooting percentages. But the Lakers held a 1 point lead with 7 seconds to go. But after receiving the inbound pass from the sideline, Elgin Baylor was controversially ruled that he stepped out of bounds, forcing the turnover. And then on the last play, Celtics brought in Havlicek, Siegfried, and Bailey Howell and Jones to execute a so-called Ohio pick from within the 3 former Iowa State players, saying a triple pick for Sam Jones. Pretty much Sam Jones jumped off the wrong foot, but the ball was avoiding the block attempt of Wilt Chamberlain and hit the front rim and bounced in, basically tying up the series at 2 games apiece. A 3-1 series advantage for the Lakers became a 2-2 tie. That was a big momentum shift. And after the game four loss, pretty much the Lakers pretty much stopped messing around and basically allowed Wilt Chamberlain to pretty much do what he does best, and that is dominate the paint. So in game five, as the series shifted back to Los Angeles, all right, Wilt Chamberlain started off hot, scoring the first third for the first 10 points in the first quarter of play. That pretty much set the tone. Then Jerry West continued on his dominating performance, pretty much scoring 39 points in that game five to get a 3-2 lead in the series. Then the Celtics came back and tied up the series at 3-all with another ugly game in which the Celtics were pretty much up by as many as 16 heading into halftime. Even though they shot a low percentage shooting 6 of 27 from the field, the Lakers did not shoot better themselves and pretty much cruised on to an easy victory to set up the eventual game 7. Now we get into the climax of the entire series. All right. The series was tied at 3-all, and the Lakers had home court advantage in the Great Western Forum. And in anticipation of winning the game and the championship, the Lakers then owner Jack Kent Cook ordered thousands of balloons with the label says "World Champions" printed on them, suspended above the rafters in the forum, and flyers were pretty much placed on every seat, saying when and not if the Lakers win the title, balloons will be released from the rafters, and the USC marching band will play "Happy Days Are Here Again." And legendary broadcaster Chick Hearn was going to interview the three stars Baylor, West, and Chamberlain in that particular order. Well, the Celtics got cute at this, all right? Read the flyer and saw the balloons up in the Raptors, and pretty much Bill Russell pretty much said those bleeping balloons are staying up there. And when Jerry West got cue of this, he was not happy about this at all. He was furious at Jack Kent Cook for doing this because all that did was give the Celtics much more motivation to beat them on their home floor than they already started out to begin with. And this game was going to take on a whole characteristic that was not seen before. So when the game started on, all right, Wilt Chamberlain. I'm sorry, not Wilt Chamberlain. Bill Russell enlisted a game plan. Quick facts breaks, get the Lakers off guard. All right. And the Lakers started off red hot, jumping out to a 24-12 lead in the first quarter of play, and basically was kept the lead at 59-56 entering into the half. Then, as the game progressed, Celtics six-man John Nelson scored 12 points in the third quarter, while the Lakers hardly connected on a quarter of their field goal attempts. And then, after the end of three quarters, the Celtics led 91-76. Then early in the fourth quarter, all right, Wilt Chamberlain entered, basically committed his fifth foul, and he never fouled out of a game of his entire career. Pretty surprising if you really think about it. Then, basically, with over 5 minutes remaining, Wilt Chamberlain was trying to grab for a rebound and landed awkwardly, injuring his left knee. And he pretty much didn't. He pretty much wanted. He pretty much had no choice but to come out of the game, and he didn't want to come out of the game. And this only infuriated Butch Van Redekop. Remember, Butch Van Redekop and Wilt Chamberlain did not like each other, and it threatened to break the chemistry of the team. Remember, the only reason why the Lakers got to the finals in the first place was off of talent alone. But listen, when you look at the team at the sum of the parts, they were a team that was pretty much divided. On one side, you had the Butch Van Redekop faction, and you had the Wilt Chamberlain faction on the other side. All right. So pretty much after Wilt Chamberlain was forced to the bench due to the knee injury, they brought in their backup center, Mel Counts, and they were able to cut the deficit to 103 to 102 with 2 minutes remaining. Then, as the Lakers were slowly coming back into the game, Wilt Chamberlain pretty much informed Butch Van Redekop that he was ready to return into the game. Then, the infamous quote that is going to stand for the test of time. You want to know what Butch Van Redekop said? He said, and I'm going to say this in the actual words, and I'm not going to bleep this. We don't need you. We're doing fine. We're doing fine without you. The hell with you. And Wilt Chamberlain never returned back into the ball game. And the Boston Celtics took advantage of this. Boston still held that 103-102 lead with about 1 minute 33 to go in the game, when reserve guard Keith Erickson knocked the ball away from John Havlicek. Then the ball went into the hands of Don Nelson, who put up a desperation shot to beat the 24-second clock. The ball hit the back of the rim and it bounced it through the hoop to give the Boston Celtics a 105-102 lead, and which was a lead that they never relinquished. Then the Lakers committed costly turnovers in the last minute and pretty much lost the game 108-106, and the Celtics once again won their 11th NBA championship in their historic franchise's history and pretty much won their 10th championship of the decade. What a game that was. And the one of the highlighting moments of that game, that whole game when watching back was, Bill Russell, you know, going he pretty much had no words to say because now you've won another championship. You've already won 11 titles. You're the greatest winner in the game. You know what I mean? And you pretty much accomplished everything that you had to accomplish, and there was nothing left to prove anymore. But it was pretty much a messy situation with the Lakers. This was a team that was supposed to beat the Celtics and win it again and win a championship and break the curse before Magic Johnson and Kareem did. And you lose the game off of a stupid petty feud. I'm telling you, it was really, really ugly. And before before the game ended, Jack Kent Cook was going to be ready to fire Butch Vedekov on the spot. And another thing too that I almost forgot, even the owner himself walked down the courtside towards the Laker bench and demanded Butch Vedekov to get into the ball game. And Butch Vedekov wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. That's why they lost the game. All right. It was too much drama between those two guys. There was no doubt that Butch Vedekov was going to get fired on the spot. That's why he quit. All right. And there was a lot of people that pretty much had different sides to the story. Wilt Elgin Baylor pretty much took the diplomatic approach, but Jerry West was fuming at Butch Vedekov, and rightfully so. They were this close to winning a championship, and because you couldn't let go of a stupid petty feud, now you're costing themselves another championship. You know what I'm saying? It had to kill Jerry West. It had to. You basically been battling the Celtics throughout the entire career. You were knocking on the doorstep of a championship, and you lose the championship off of that. I mean, it had to devastate him. It had to. All right. And Jerry West played his heart throughout the entire series. He's averaged 37.9 points per game, close to 38 points a game on a bad hamstring, nonetheless. And he became the only player in the history of the NBA Finals to win the Finals MVP in his inaugural year on the losing side. Ever since then, no other player has won the Finals MVP on the losing team. All right, there've been several other cases, but it's never happened since 1969. And pretty much afterwards, the Celtics, the main core players of the Celtics of Bill Russell, pretty much retired on a championship note. It took a couple of years before the Celtics could win another championship, but for the Lakers, it ended on a very bad note. And pretty much after that, the Lakers returned back to the finals in 1970, but got destroyed by the Knicks in that famous Game 7. And it wasn't until 1972 when Elgin Baylor was forced to retire due to knee injuries, and pretty much Bill Chamberlain, who coached the Lakers at the time, convinced Wilt Chamberlain to change his approach from being the dominant scorer, but to being a rebounder and a shot blocker, and pretty much rolled off an unbelievable 33 straight in 72 to win the championship against the Knicks in 5 games. And the other thing too is that with Jerry, even though he was happy to win the championship, he pretty much will tell you that it was not against the Boston Celtics. It would have been the greatest feeling for him to ever had in his basketball career, even though he was happy that they won the title in 72. But it was not against the Celtics, right? And pretty much after that, the main character of the Lakers in the 70s, pretty much retired. But the rivalry resumed back in the 80s. But another thing that really developed after that series was that the relationship between Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell was always, it was friendly, during the earlier stages, but after the 69 series, Bill Russell took the opportunity to try to basically crap all over on Wilt Chamberlain for saying that he was a coward, that he refused to get back into to get back to continue on playing. You know what I'm saying? And he pretty much called it a malanderer and accused him of copping out of the game when the Lakers was going about to lose. And Wilt Chamberlain was livid about this and basically viewed him as a backstabber. All right, and basically those two men did not speak to each other for 20 years until Russell pretty much went to Chamberlain decades later, and personally apologized to each other. And and thankfully they basically closed that feud because after Chamberlain died in 1999, Russell Russell was the second man to call Chamberlain's nephew and pretty much gave him his condolences. You know what I mean? And pretty much at Chamberlain's eulogy, Russell pretty much said that Chamberlain was not considered as a rival, but it's basically rather to have as competition, and that the pair would always be friends through eternity. So yeah, it was a lot of a lot of aftermath after that whole entire series. You know what I mean? Looking back, I really think that the Lakers really did themselves in by not utilizing what their strengths were, was basically letting Wilt Chamberlain, being a disruptor on the in the big in the middle, and basically, Elgin Baylor taking a bit of a lesser role of the familiar slashing ability, but the and also, but the, let's be honest on something here. I just think that Baylor's game was all about slashing and all about getting to the basket. And when Chamberlain came in, his pretty much the middle was clogged up. You couldn't get to the paint as much as he could have. But I think that as he aged, I think that less of his skill set started to show, later on. And I think that it had a lot to do with the fact about how he retired early. It was not just because of the knee injuries alone. Because remember, in '72, Bill Sharman named Wilt Chamberlain as one of his captains, and that I think that has something to do about why Baylor pretty much retired. It was not just on the injuries themselves because it had a lot to do with it too, but it had a lot to do with something like that. I just believe that would to be the case, but regardless of that, this would be the last time those two teams would meet until 1984, when basically Magic Johnson and Larry Bird resumed the great rivalry of the '80s that pretty much saved the NBA. And it wasn't until 1985 when the Lakers pretty much ended the curse and finally defeated the Boston Celtics in the Boston Garden to win another championship. And so, yeah, it was pretty much a climax to one of the great rivalries in the NBA during the '60s, and a climax to one of the great individual rivalries in the middle between Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. But when you look back into that whole series of its entirety, it's forever going to go down as probably one of the top 10, or even maybe one of the top 5 greatest series in NBA history. It certainly had a lot of great Hall of Famers, a lot of drama, a lot of controversy there, and just a few breaks in the Celtics' favor that ended up being the difference of winning another championship against a heavily favored Lakers team that should have whopped the floor with them in 5 games. If basically looking back on this whole scenario in my basketball mind. But so that's what I feel about the whole thing. I hope you guys enjoyed, what I had to break down throughout this whole series. You let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I will once again put in another poll to basically ask you guys another subject you want me to do upon. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope that Too Raw for TV could do a breakdown of this video too, because I would love to hear what he has to say about it, about the great '69 final series. But that's all I have to say for now. You let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Have a safe holiday season.